Hi, I'm Rick Crow, and this is Short Track Stories.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Short Track Stories. Brandon alongside Uncle Rick. It's been a while, but we are back and we're ready to give you episode number 8. Special guest today, Duke Hoenshell. He'll be joining us later. Had a great conversation with him, and a lot of fans reached out to us and specifically to Uncle Rick to try and get Duke on. And after speaking with him, we know why. Great conversation. We'll get into that just a little bit later. But Uncle Rick, how you been?
I'm good. I didn't realize that my personal Facebook kind of isn't tied in with Short Track Stories, or that it doesn't cross post or whatever. But been battling some cancer here for the last couple of years, and it popped up in a different place a couple weeks ago or a month ago or whatever. Actually, just before we went to Darlington. I wasn't supposed to go to Darlington. My doctor wasn't very happy with that, but came home from Darlington, had surgery the next day, and now been going through some treatments for a couple of months. So that's why we missed the show, peeps. We didn't want to, but I've been a little bit laid up, but now we're kind of back on track, and our schedule has slowed down a little bit till we get through this little stretch with me. But I think I'm on the white flag lap, and it certainly was nice to talk to Duke Hoenshell, and man, that's a guy that'll get anybody's spirits up, right?
Oh yeah, totally. So just a quick background before we get into it. Uncle Rick, had you met Duke before, or how did you guys two arrange this interview?
No, I had never met Duke. I saw him race when I was a kid. But basically, when we started doing these podcasts, we asked people on Facebook, who do you guys want to hear from? And he was right up there with everybody. And what was funny, and I think I said this to him, was I think you have the least amount of wins or the least career span of anybody we were asked to speak with. And, everybody I talked to, and I said, hey, why Duke? And they were like, oh man, he's just a great guy. He's just a great guy. And I mean, we found that out too. He's a guy that, you want over for a barbecue and you want to sit around the fire pit and just let him tell stories all night long. He's an entertaining guy. Yeah. And turns out to be a real smart racer and a hell of a racer too.
Yeah, we go through the gamut with him, and we come to find out. And speaking of his smarts, he's a mechanic and engineer of a mind. Been working for Mercedes for over 40 years, he said. And so, it was a fun interview. So hopefully you enjoy it. And again, please like and subscribe. We want to keep this podcast free. So please share, please like and subscribe. And without further ado, here's episode 8 of Short Track Stories with Duke Hoenshell.
38.
All right, Duke, thank you for joining us here on Short Track Stories. First of all, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Orange, California.
Beautiful.
About 11 miles from the beach.
Did you go to the beach today?
No, I went to, we have a pretty decent looking backyard, so I laid out there to get some color.
Excellent. Right on. Well, Uncle Rick, I do think that people have reached out to you and they said that Duke has been a crowd favorite for a long time.
Absolutely. I mean, I got texts. Well, when we initially did this thing on Facebook, we asked people, who do you want to see? And Hoenshell was right up on top of that. And I was like, oh, he's number 38. Let's do it.
That's me. 38 is what my buddy Mike calls me.
I love it. So I guess we can start back with the origins. But Duke, where did racing start for you and your family?
Well, my dad, we were fans at Speedway 605, and I was coming up and interested in motorcycles and that. And then they decided that they'd really rather do something different than motorcycles. So my dad went out and bought a car from Pat Minty Sr., and that's where it all started for us.
So did you race motorcycles at all?
No. I put 38,000 miles on my little Honda mini trail.
Awesome. So let's go back even further than that, Duke. You were born in Africa.
Yes, I was.
How many years did your father serve in the Air Force?
He served 25 years and then he retired. So he was he gave it his all.
God bless him. And we just lost him a couple weeks ago, and we know that he was near and dear to your heart. And but born in Africa on an Air Force base. That's and so how old were you when you left there and came to Orange?
I was probably about 1.5, and then we moved to Santa Ana for a good bit. And then after when I was maybe 9, 10 is when my mom married Whitey, who's my stepfather. And he's the one that got me going with the racing.
Interesting.
So
you and I kind of have a parallel story after doing a little research on you and what you did and some stuff like that. It's kind of cool. And what was the first time you went to Disneyland? It's right down the street.
My dad delivered materials there when they were building it. So as soon as he could get tickets, he drug our butts there. That was way back when they had the Indian Village still.
Yes.
So, and then you had to crank your own tram car. It wasn't automatic. It was a manual drive.
The overheads or
yeah.
Oh wow,
it's crazy.
That's a whole show in itself right there.
Serious.
I'm pulling your lariat, man.
We go every year. Our family has been going every year for 20 years, Brandon, on Thanksgiving?
17.
Yeah, because none of the ladies know how to cook in our family. So born in Africa, Orange is a pretty decent miles away from Speedway 605, but Whitey took you to Speedway 605, huh?
You bet he did. And I when we first started, I couldn't get in the pits, so we were had walkie talkies to start with because I just had to know what's going on. And eventually we fibbed a little bit on the NASCAR license date, and I got in there when I was just turned 15. So then I could hang with him.
You had to be really dedicated to racing. I mean, you grew up in Orange, and I've seen pictures of you when you were a good looking dude. Like you might as well have been like Tarzan instead of Ron Ely or something, or a Magnum PI. I mean, you were a typical light-haired, tanned Orange County kid. And there was a lot of distraction in Orange County for you to drive that far to go racing.
My dad, we were just dedicated. Early on, we decided that we were a team, and we're a SAD racing team, and that was my Selby, my dad's real name, and my mom's middle name, Ann, and Duke. So once we committed to it, then that's what we did. That was what all we did. He took us on some great vacations. I mean, he really looked after his family, but the racing was first and foremost.
Now, what did you buy from the Minties? Rest in peace, Senior.
My dad got his 57 Chevy stock car, and I believe he was either moving on or moving up, and that's when we started. He built the 66 Chevelle that he ran at Riverside. So then it was anywhere Pat was racing and we weren't, we were there. It was really something.
I think I heard something about a replica or a tribute car to that 57 Chevy.
I became friends on Facebook with Gary Dion, and he was showing some pictures of his Mustang he's putting together.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked way out in the field there, and I could smell a 57 out there. So I typed in, I said, "What's the deal with that car out there?" And he said, "It's a 57 Chevy stock car." And I said, "Well, I'd really like to talk to you about that sometime. So as time went on, we just kept communicating about it, and then I decided that this is something I wanted to get. And he went above and beyond what I ever expected of somebody to do that. It was a mess out there in that field, but he took the time and the care and painted that thing and got it ready to drive on the trailer for me. So I took my son, which was wonderful because my dad took me to go pick up Pat's car. So here many years later, I take my son up there and we load that baby up and we drive it home, and it was just wonderful. I was so fortunate to be able to take him and have that same experience for him.
Yeah.
So we got that thing home, and he videoed me backing it off the trailer, and it was just so cool to watch that. I pull it up in the driveway, and then he had to put the camera down because I couldn't get my little well-nourished butt out of that thing. He had to like get pick me up and drag me out of that thing. And that's when I decided, well, I need a milk crate. That'll solve everything.
Yeah, we'd all still be racing if we could climb through the window, right? So where's the car now?
It's upstairs. I have it put away and covered up, and I had it lettered. When on his first car, he let me do the lettering. So I had the guy that did all the sign painting for us the whole time, and he come over and we had a seriously nostalgic time. He lettered that baby up just like it looked in the day.
Who was that?
That was 3 years ago. And
who was the letterer?
Oh, it was Dennis Rickliffs. He, most famous for his thing with Chip Foose and that, but he's one of the old school hand lettering guys, and him and his wife supported me just my entire racing time. I never paid him a dime, but I did things that I hoped would show good faith.
Those guys back then, people don't understand now, they're raps and they can do them at the track. And, but Mike Johannes lettered all my cars. He was just a kid back then. And, sometimes it was a 15, 16. I mean, he was laying on my floor asleep when the Northridge earthquake hit.
Wow.
But it was hours and hours and hours for those guys.
Well, they took 2 days right out of the prime time of getting that thing ready to go to the track.
Right. Yeah. You couldn't work on it.
Last.
Yeah. You couldn't work on it.
So a good story is I worked at the dealership, and he came there 3 days a week to pinstripe cars. So he comes by and he's on his way in, and he looks at me and he's like shaking his head, and he says, "Man, you just cost me a whole bunch of money." And I'm like, what? And well, he keeps on walking, and I had to get work done. So I went back there at lunch, and I'm like, what happened? What? Well, I went out and bought a vinyl machine because you're just kicking my ass up at Mesa Marin, and I can't come there every week and letter your stuff. So I'm making you stickers from here on out. I'm like, that's pretty cool, Dennis.
I remember that transition. It's funny because I think the first car I had lettered from Johannes was 1989, and beautiful car. And I painted it pink because my mom passed away of cancer. And my guys were like, "You painted a car pink?" And Johannes said the same thing, but he lettered it gorgeous. And between a wreck in the oval heat race and a wreck in the figure eight main at the end of the night, we had to reskin the car on week 2. And he was like, "What'd you do to it?" So Duke, so your dad, Whitey, Speedway 605, was he pretty much just a local guy?
He was definitely a local guy. we had to learn the stock car racing thing.
Right.
And so, up till then, Ivan was our idol, and Bill Spencer and Ray Johnstone, all these guys, and especially the Esau's, they were a racing family, and that's what we wanted to be. So
right.
The Johnstones were also that way. So we fashioned ourselves after the people you want to be like out there, the Esau's. And so we just kept working at it and working at it and working at it. So it just slowly but surely evolved into where, I built my own first car, my own Chevelle in 76, 74, right in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's when we just robbed Pat's 57 of everything good on it. And
now I'm sure Pat's car, I mean, I've never seen a minty car that wasn't absolutely stunning.
People like that inspire you in a lot of ways, but he definitely showed us that to really make nice looking cars, round the corners, make yourself proud. And along with that, we made a lot of other people proud too. So he was for a guy to look up to and want to be like, he was the best for us.
The Minties. So I raced with Junior in super late models, and I never knew that Senior was a West racer or anything until, pretty later on. But I don't think we've done a podcast yet, Brandon, that somebody hasn't mentioned that they bought a car from the Minties, or that the Minties coached them along, right?
No, every single one that we've had, the Mentee's name have been dropped. And I was going to ask you, Duke, I know, Uncle Rick, you hold the Mentees in a very high regard, but Duke, what was it about the Mentees, or what was about Mentee Senior that made him something so inspirational to you?
Well, he first of all, he sold us a car, so right off the bat, he was a hero. And then, but we had been watching him the whole time, and so to have his car was a big deal for us. And so he always took the time to come and check on my dad and me on how we were doing, and always showed an interest in me. And pretty cool.
Yeah, they were the same way with super late models. I mean, everybody pretty much at Saugus would help you till you made the dash, and then you're kind of on your own, right?
Yeah, that's when I found out winning isn't really winning.
Yeah.
All the guys.
You got your start with that 66 Chevelle at Speedway 605, little half mile. And is that where you cut your teeth before you went to Pacific Coast Racing and what they call it, West or whatever?
I ran, I think maybe a year and a half out there until I wrecked. I just put it in the fence, something fierce. So then it was time for me to rethink what we were doing. And at the time, I had become friends with Bob Goodwin and Bobby Goodwin. And so they had a Riverside car, and Clint Hutchins was driving it. So I went with them to Riverside to help out and do whatever I could. And that's where I got the bug and the inspiration to build a car for Riverside and the big tracks. So Ontario was happening at the time, and we were going to go to the bigger tracks. I just couldn't. I was working hard, but we just couldn't swing the 10, 20 races a year. I just wasn't making enough. So I knew that I could concentrate on those races, and I had a shot of doing better.
So let's get this straight. Go ahead. I know where you're going, Brandon.
What?
Let's get this straight. So I cut my teeth at, I did some dirt racing, and then I cut my teeth at Saugus, right? And I shit myself when I went to Mesa Marin. And every one of you guys we talked to, so you just said, yeah, so I wrecked my car at Speedway 605, And then I decided this wasn't for me. And so I'm going to build a Riverside in Ontario car. Like
That's how it was.
Everybody has said that. Sedgwick, Inslow, they all said, yeah. So we went to Riverside in Ontario. Like, and you guys shrug it off like it's nothing.
Right.
But it is not nothing. It's like hitting a little league pitch and then going to pro pitching. Like, and so you went and you worked on this guy's Riverside car. And did you build your first Riverside car, or did you buy
bet.
one?
No, I built it. I had the roll cage built, but I worked at with Honest Steve at his wrecking yard, and he hooked me up with a frame and a body, and we did that out in my dad's side yard. He back then it was a Lincoln welder, stick welder, but he'd had me gluing stuff together for quite a while, and then I always took metal shop in high school, and so I just continued to get to where I could weld pretty decent. So
pretty decent. Let's go to Ontario. You're just like me. We learned. Hornaday told me, if you want to keep racing, you better learn how to weld or you're going to go broke. I'm like, okay. And so we welded, my buddy Garrett Cromside and we welded pipes together in a vise, and then we hit them with a sledgehammer. And when they didn't break, we're like, shit, we're welders.
It was right? That way. Right. I found out the hard way, though. A guy had to get really good at it. I was okay at it, but the first time we went to Ontario, I put it on the pole, and I was doing a heck of a dog fight with Glenn Francis, and back and forth. But 2 laps from the end, my panel bar broke off the frame. So, and that was just really when I needed to be a really good welder. So
did the weld break, or did it rip the metal?
No, it broke. It pulled the welds. And so that was right about the time I was turning 21. So for my 21st birthday, my mom and dad got me a Miller wire feed welder. And then things got better after that.
So let's get this. We always use thin wall tubing, so the welds never broke, right? The tubing ripped, but the welds never broke. So let's get this straight. So you went from Speedway 605 to the pole at Ontario?
Yep. It was right at the beginning, and I was working harder and making more money, and I got George Boltoff built us a motor, had me some Bobby Ellison headers, which made it way faster.
Yeah.
And we went out there, and it was a short field. I'm not going to gloat about it, but I still put it on the pole. And
well, there were some shoes in that field. I looked it up, and were the Allison headers like 180s?
No, but they came out flat. They didn't have the 4 collectors, so that you could get them really right up against the floor pan. So, gotcha. God, I wish I still had those things.
Oh, I wish I had
them above my fireplace.
Yeah, I wish I had the 20 SS Chevelles I cut up for street stock racing. Right.
I got a question for you, Duke. When you mention Riverside, every single person that we've talked to, when they mention Riverside, they have like a little gleam in their eye. But how would you describe Riverside in Ontario to somebody that maybe has never seen it before?
I didn't look at it as that way. I just was a young man, and I was going to do it. And so it wasn't like I had been to both of them before, so that it wasn't like it was a giant thing I was going to. I'd sit in the S's with my dad at Riverside, and we were at the first race at Ontario, so they were really familiar to me. And I just it wasn't raw talent, man. I'm telling you, I just got out there and did the best I could. And as time went on, it didn't come easy or quick. As time went on, we just got better, and that's how it went for me.
It was raw talent. I've heard Owen Kern say it, that if you would have had some money and some sponsorships, it would have been a lot different for you. And I mean, I don't think I've talked to anybody that is in the know that didn't say that you just had raw talent. I don't care how you play it down. Those were massive tracks. I mean, Brandon, never saw either one of them. And the road course is the road course. But Ontario, I went there with my parents and watched you guys race. It was daunting, And I mean, they had Ontario 500s there. They had Indy cars there, so it wasn't like it was Speedway 605 or something, And so you were building your own cars. Did you cheat?
We didn't.
Were you in the gray area?
No. Well, I did on the Chevelle because I bought the front fender group from Bob Goodwin they had wedged out the back of the fenders, so the nose was about 4 inches lower than any other Chevelle out there. We always put the jack stands in the front just a little bit higher with maybe one hole, so it didn't look like it just fell off the end of the map.
In the pits. Now, when you were doing your own cars, thin wall tubing?
No, it was 095, man. We stuck with the book. If it was 095, we wanted 096.
Right. I could see that at Ontario and Riverside. I saw some hellacious wrecks at Riverside. And so and you're like me, I started building my own cars because I felt like the car manufacturers, they were building 10 cars exactly the same. And then they usually had a house car, and you always thought that was a little bit better. But I always thought that they were cookie cutter. And if I wanted something different and I wanted to be in the gray area, I had to build my own stuff as well. And so I always built my own stuff. Is that what you kind of were thinking too?
Yes, we evolved into that. Back in the Chevelle days, it was, pull a control arm off of one of those, and then you built your own tubular upper arms and used the Chevy 3/4 ton pickup spindles. And so that was how it was. But as we evolved into the open comp and that's when we started designing and building our own control arms and everything but the spindle we made.
Tube chassis.
Tube chassis. A stock car Tom was our best friend then. He built a lot of stuff. He hooked us up with the parts that we could actually make it happen. And tons of coaching from that guy. I could never get there during work, so I'd go after work, and we'd be there till 9 o'clock.
And he was right in your backyard, kind of right there.
He was just down the road, man. He was not only was he helpful, but he was inspirational to me. His parting words every time was, "Work hard, Duke."
And you were young. And so you took, I think some of the kids nowadays, I just saw an interview the other night where Haley Deegan was banging on my buddy Todd Bodine. I just think that some of the kids nowadays don't look at the history of the sport and don't look at some of the older guys as maybe I could learn something from that guy. Maybe it's just humbleness, or maybe it's take my sunglasses off when I'm doing an interview, or, button up my Velcro up here so they can see my sponsor, stuff like that. But it sounds to me like you were humble enough to take the Minties and Stock Car Products guys and listen to what they said. And that's probably because you were raised as a military brat, you probably had some respect. So,
well, I did. And I thought that was basically an unfair advantage that I had, as I knew who these guys, and I knew how to shut up and listen and take in what they had to say, from Floyd Johnson to, there's so many people that taught me the things that helped me make it just even get there. Right. From transmissions to rear ends to motors. I just happened to get around some really good people that I bought into everything they said.
And so who was doing your rear ends? What?
Me.
Speedway? But
No.
Speedway, how you guys just
the housings.
You guys had Fords
Speedway
or Speedway?
Did my housings for me.
That was when Danny still had it.
Yeah, I kept him busy. I still can see, looking out my right hand window, when I hit the guardrail in the S's at Riverside, and I put it in gear, and I'm hey, it ain't going anywhere. I look out that right window, and there's the tube, the wheel, the caliper, everything is laying over there about 30 feet away. I went, well, I guess we aren't going anywhere.
Well, that Panhard bars, I bet you that's the most stressed part of a race car anyway, especially in a. You guys didn't use Watts Link. You used Panhard bars, which.
Well, we went to a Watts Link, and probably the first race we won at Riverside was, I still say it was because of that Watts Link.
I would agree. Yeah. We tried one at Saugus. It was too wishy-washy. They probably work good in a figure eight, but I could see how it would work on a road course.
We tried to make that thing work everywhere. And the truth is I should have just went back to the Panhard bar if I was going in circles, and went back to the Watts Link at Riverside.
But, because the Watts I never got a good feel from my car with the Watts Link on an oval. I just never got that where it squats you in your seat and tells you to go. It was kind of always just wishy-washy both ways. Yeah. So that's awesome. So I read an article, and it's a good tee up for this, because you're talking about Riverside and in Ontario. You said in an article once that you didn't have the technology to run with the big boys at Mesa Marin until you built your own car. What was about Mesa that was different in your eyes than Riverside in Ontario? Was it the grapevine, going over the grapevine? That was daunting for me, man.
It was going there was always easy. Coming home is right after the grapevine is when the hallucinations started.
Yeah. What did you tow with? What did you tow with, Duke, to get over the grapevine?
We had a 71 Ford F250 with a little camper shell and a home built. We built a trailer in the garage. So
no fenders. No one ever put fenders on their trailers back then.
No, it was the axles were welded right to the bottom, so the tires were the suspension.
That is the best way to do it. I built one of those too. You could load it without ramps.
So the thing about going to a tube car there is we were the only ones without one.
Okay, so it was a tube chassis.
You had to evolve. And so then at the time, my first car after I built my Chevelle was a Stock Car Products Nova. And so they did a wonderful job. And then when it started heading towards the coilover and the open comp, that's when we just said, well, I think we can do this here, and let's give it a shot. And so we did. We almost didn't know what we were doing, but we did know what we were doing.
Right.
We just knew it had to be so far off the ground, and the roof could only be so high. And so I got hooked up with Ed Ash, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about that fella, but he was ahead of his time. And he taught me a lot about the front suspension and the geometry. And we built a tool that you could mock up the roll in the chassis and kind of watch where the tire was going. So we jacked with A-arm lengths and positions and that until that tire wasn't going like crazy. And then we called that good. And that's where we built it from there.
The original tie down and bump steer rigs. You should have patented those, Duke. You would have been a millionaire, right?
Yes. I'd be tired of building them, I'm sure.
Now, Ed Ash, how did you hook up with him? Because I thought he was from Cajon or Vegas.
He was from up in Azusa, which was 605. So he was the motor guy.
Yeah.
And so when Bolthoff retired, so then we were needing to advance, and that's when we got hooked up with Eddie. And then Eddie had his car there, and I'm looking at this going, this is what we need to figure out how to do right here.
Beautiful red car, if I remember right.
Yeah, and it was 43 inches to the top of the roof at ride height. I mean, that's down there.
Yeah.
So we built some really neat cars back in that open comp day, but then they started making us raise the roof and bring the track back in narrower, and it all evolved into where it became the Southwest Tour.
Right. And so it went from wedge bodies to Southwest Tour. And
yes.
But why did you, the Nova, it was a Nova body, but it wasn't a Nova. Was it a Shinova or whatever they called? Because they were coil spring back.
Yeah, it was a coil spring truck arm, stock car products car.
So they just use that weird looking Nova body. It was kind of bitchin' looking, but
yeah, it was a 74 Nova, and then we reskinned it to the 77 Ventura because we're wanting to race. Back in that time, it was there was this indecision. 605 wasn't going anymore, so it was Winston West, and so we were going Winston West racing, and so we had to keep up the body style to be able to go to those races.
That was a great looking. Those I had a Ventura nose on my car, and they were beautiful. And until they went to like the Regals and stuff. But you ran a Firebird, a lot of Pontiacs.
So right when we built our own first car, it was a 1980 Firebird. I just liked the way they looked, and so we just stuck with the Firebird until we got the deal with Fisher Engineering for the 6-cylinder race, and that's when we turned it into a Camaro, because you couldn't have a Chevy V6 in a Pontiac Firebird.
Oh, they tried those rules still. I mean, you know what? I think that the rules are just copied archaic rules, because they had that same crap at Saugus, Chevy to Chevy, right? And we're running Buick bodies with Chevys in them. We're like, what do you want to run a Buick engine? No, we're not,
Yeah.
But it was still there, make to make, model to model, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it worked that way.
Yeah. So, well, the Tour has done a hell of a job. I mean, they're still strong today. With whatever they're doing is right on. So,
we were the first. Ron Esau won the championship the first year, and I won a race in that first year. So all of us were transitioned right into it. It just was, if you wanted to go race at Riverside, you had to have it. So that's what we did.
I remember I was at I want to say it was 86. My mom, we would always go set in the S turns. And it was 80. It was always either you, Inslow, or Esau. And I remember in 86, you had that race won, and you and Esau were banging doors through the S's and coming down the back stretch. And then your car what happened to it?
We call that the Ronnie and Duke Slammer race around here. Man.
It was like the pass in the grass.
What happened is I learned a lot about how to build the cowling to the front of the radiator, because the way we built it is when I bottomed out, it tore all the rivets, and the piece of bottom metal just flipped up right in front of the radiator. And so for the last 6-7 laps, it was just pegged. That's when I learned how good Mobil 1 oil is.
Yeah, there's synthetic oil.
Yeah, it stayed oil long enough to get me second place.
So you because you went out for overheating at a couple races prior to that, and we had the same problem when we went to Riverside for the first time. I was helping crew Tommy O'Mara's car. Alan Thacker was driving. It was a Nova body, and we had a fan on it, and the fan kept breaking the water pump. But you didn't need a fan at Riverside because you're going so fast it wouldn't suck in the air anyway. But you're right, that cowling on the front has to stay open, and you would have won 3 in a row at Riverside. So you go to Riverside, which once again, I mean, okay, so you win it. Let's just say you win at Ontario, right? It's an oval, and you went from a half mile to whatever. But where'd you learn how to road race?
I just went out and gave it a shot. The one thing that did help a lot, and I got to hand it to him is I went up to that Bob Bontrain school, and I left there with style. Up till then, I was just getting through it. But then they taught me how a style and how to be and how to think, and I had never had that kind of coaching before. So it was, for me, it was a game changer.
Right.
It just I was so worried about getting the car there and making sure the rear end didn't burn up and the tranny didn't, and making sure everything lasted just so I could finish. And I would never really put enough thought into how to drive it. So after that class, it definitely pointed me in the right direction.
Let's touch on your Mobile One synthetic really quick. I remember I had the exact same car as my buddy Larry Krieger in Hobby Stocks. It was like our first year together. We had the exact same car, exact same tires, and he would yank me in the same engine builder, and he'd yank me down the straightaway. And everybody said, "You're not getting off the corner." No. Well, my dad was a 60 weight Valvoline guy. Right. And I went to Krieger. He was a mechanic. And I said, "Dude, what is it?" He goes, "What kind of oil you use?" I said, 60 weight Valvoline. He goes, "You run faster on the pavement or on the beach?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I use zero weight Mobile One." And he goes, "So your crank and your pistons and all that is going." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." And so I changed to the Mobile One synthetic and started winning races. And you figured that out early, huh? Somebody had to tell me.
That frying pan test you saw on TV, it's real. Yeah. It is real. We proved it. And I still, to this day, every car I got has Mobile One in it. And that's it.
Yeah, the original guys.
It's just how it is.
Duke, what would you give us an example when you talked about your style? What would you say is your style?
Well, first of all, I learned how to focus. So then that's an important part to your style. You're thinking about it. You're putting the time and effort in it before you even get to the track to concentrate on it. And so that's the kind of style it gave me. I still, I learned a little bit about rhythm, but I learned more by applying it there. I got a lot out of the course, but then I went there and it just applying what I had learned just seemed to come natural. So it made the next race we finished second. So it was it worked for me.
How would you prepare mentally? Would you be able to visualize the track and each turn in your mind, like the night before, the day of, or how do you do that?
I had I went off the track in turn 2 there once, and it was after it rained, and my front cross member caught one of those ruts, and it just stopped me. Well, I hurt my back. So I went over to the chiropractor a few blocks from work, and I go in there, and she was sharing a space with a sports hypnotist. And so I asked her, I said, "What's the deal with this guy here?" "Oh yeah, this is what he does." "Well, you know what? I'm going to give that guy a try." So I went there, and what he made me do was, I want you to, once he got me all relaxed and that, I want you to run your perfect lap. And if you have to back up and do it again, then that's what I want. So the first day I went, I did not make a lap in an hour. I could not. I kept backing up and going and backing up and going. Well, after about 5 or 6 visits, I could make about 4 laps. So it taught me how to concentrate and focus, and it just it came easier after that. So nobody, I didn't have many. I had life coaches and people that taught me how to build stuff and that, but nobody ever taught me that kind of stuff. So I'm thankful I hurt my back, and dang glad I was sharp enough to give that guy a try, because it did make a difference for me. And
I'm a firm believer in that stuff too. And I think I just want to know what track were you visualizing?
Riverside, that was where the money was. In '86, it cost us $9,500 to build that car, and I brought home 9. So that was good dang business sense for me.
Yeah, the November race of '86 paid 7 G's to win.
Yeah.
You had a Fisher motor that was probably a beast. And were you a there's just so many things that you say that fascinate me. I'm going to go to a sports hypnotist, and that's all such modern stuff. And um, these kids nowadays, and so it's hard to put into perspective. I was always well funded, but there was still the stress of building my own cars, towing them by myself, getting to the track. I had guys, my buddy Gary Silvers and some other guys that helped in the garage religiously and at the track. But people don't understand, there's this stress in and of itself of loading your car, getting it to the track, driving to the track and thinking, did I get this done? Did I get this done? Did I get this done? With some of the guys you were racing with, they had guys that were handling all that stuff for them. In the stress of doing it all yourself, not having a sponsor, knowing that if I wreck it or if I break it, I may not race the next week. I mean, I grew up racing with the Spanglers, Keith and his dad, and Keith is a phenomenal driver. And I always wondered what Keith would have been had he had a bottomless funds, right? And the amount of stress that you went through to get through these races, people don't understand that, Duke. And you just hit it on the head of, it took a sports psychiatrist even back then to kind of just help you out enough to relax to do it.
I've if I was fortunate in a few ways, one of them was that I never hesitated to ask the older guys or look up to them or look to them for what they knew, because the only way I became a good Mercedes mechanic was using that same method. You didn't learn how to rebuild a steering box unless you went over and befriended the guy at lunchtime and asked him, hey, would you show me how to do that? So I wasn't afraid to go and ask for things like that. So
right,
it still has helped me just in so many, in business and in life, not being afraid to ask these guys, what do they think? I'm not asking the young fellows yet, but I certainly wasn't afraid to ask those guys for their advice.
Yeah, it's there's such a mental aspect of racing that a lot of people don't understand either, and they watch it on TV and they're like, oh, they go in circles for 500 miles or whatever. But I've done some driver coaching and some spotting, and some kids you can work with, and some kids you can't work with. And even my best buddy, he used to wreck all the time, and we became friends. And I never wrecked, but I wasn't aggressive, and so I would consider myself like an Insolo type driver, and he was more of a Hornaday type driver where he was just going to go to the front. But the problem was he would do it in a dash or he would do it in a heat race, and then the car would get all torn up, right? And so when radios came out, I'd started helping him on the radio. I'd be like, hey, Garrett, this is a heat race and you start second in the main. Let's just get through the heat race, right? And then the main will come, you'll win the main, and settle him down. And so there is such a mental aspect. And when you're on the road course, Duke, were you a heel toe guy? Or
definitely.
That's another thing they don't understand
too.
Yeah,
I learned that at Bondurant.
And so so when you watch racing today, Brandon, they just jam it into gear. There's no clutch unless they're leaving the pits. But back in the day, these guys had to clutch and downshift every 30 something times a lap. And so they'd have their their heel on the brake and their toe on the clutch at the same time. And so they'd be doing this while they're working the gas. And it was just, I remember watching the foot cam for Ricky Rudd one time. It's just a ballet. It's beautiful.
When we saw that stuff, that was gold.
Gold.
It was, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I can be Ricky.
Yeah.
It really helped. I have a good story from the 86 race. We were the first guys to get a Jericho out there. Up till then, we built our own Ford top loaders. So then I'm using the clutch, and I'm protecting this $3,500 transmission. And during practice, Neil Bonnet came by and was checking the car out, and he says, "How do you like that transmission?" I said, "Oh, it's great, man. You're using the clutch." "Yeah, this thing cost me a lot of money." "Oh, you got to stop using that clutch, man. Let me tell you." And I went out there, and I was like, "Holy moly!" That was the end of the clutch. Getting in and out of the pits was where it was most important. But I'd still been using the clutch had he not come by.
Right. It's amazing how many of those guys also, because I mean, obviously there was separate rules, but we've heard a lot in this podcast about the Cup guys kind of coming in and snooping around your guys, whatever they called them back then, Pacific racing cars or whatever, your wedge bodies or your Camaros. They shouldn't have been as nice a cars as the Cup cars, certainly not funded like the Cup cars, but there was a lot of innovation that happened in those Pacific Series cars that the Cup guys didn't know about. Power steering, some stuff like that. And they too were humble enough to come around you guys and be like, "Hey, what are you slamming around in that car?"
They had no idea what they were doing for young racers, from Bobby Allison to Richard Petty to all those guys that took the time to come and say something nice or guide you. When they went away, you were just full inside. This guy took the time to come and check our stuff out. They were a huge inspiration to a young racer. They just didn't know that.
Right. That's lost today.
They were just good people doing good things, and we benefited.
Yeah, that's lost today. I remember as a kid going through the garage area, and you could walk up and talk to any of them. And even today, I mean, you can walk up and talk to any of the old time racers, but trying to talk to one of these kids, and they brush you off like you're nothing. And it's a rich man's game today, Duke, right?
You bet. The first on our first couple of trips to Riverside with that Chevelle, I kept missing old turn 2 out there. So I had that little front spoiler tucked under the radiator a lot. And Hoenshell McGriff come by and he says, "What's going on, man? This is the second time I've seen this. I'm having trouble with turn 2. So he just put his arm around me and told me how to get around turn 2. And I never tucked that spoiler underneath again. For guys like that to come up and give you that little bit you need, it's just wonderful. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Well, and you were a lot younger too.
Oh, you bet.
And so they probably, looked at you as this young kid, and they wanted to help. They were sincerely, wanting to help. And so you're talking about just that little flap that we would use at a short track to kind of scoop the air up. You didn't have it sealed to the nose yet back then.
Oh no, it was just a little piece of little blade hanging down there to try and make some stuff go through the radiator.
I'm surprised you guys didn't have it all sealed like an airbox, like what they would use today.
We eventually went that direction, but back then it was NASCAR sportsman rules. So that wasn't even in the 70s, 77, 78. That stuff just wasn't even happening yet. So the Pontiac Ventura and the Nova, we as time was evolving and heading towards open comp or, away from the stock body stuff, we did some stuff to the front of that thing, and we did everything we could because we were going out there racing in Ventura against Jimmy Inslow in a slicked out Camaro.
In a wedge body?
It wasn't so wedgy, but it was still way more aerodynamic than a car without a little blade in the front. I mean, we went out there and got whooped, and then we had to come home and do some more homework.
So you're really good on the road courses. And like I said, for a while, it was either you, Inslow, or Esau. But there were some good dudes in those, you say, yeah, it was okay. You ran up to Sears Point at one or two races also, ran up there, huh? That's a big tow for a 71 Ford pickup truck.
Yeah, we went up there and raced. I think Jimmy Inslow was in it when we went straight up the straightaway and didn't do the carousel. So it was like a 38-mile straightaway.
and you were hauling hay right there.
Oh, geez, we were flying. But then the next time we went up with the tour car, then they started using the carousel
just to slow them down.
It was better. It was funner. I mean, I really, really loved going to that place. And that's where Bondurant was. So it was like going to some place I really knew. And
right.
We did good. I mean, we didn't win, but we were in the top 5, and I thought we held our own. So
you were still only 25, 26 years old, and these guys were all 30s and 40s and had crew chiefs and sponsors and everything else. And, in 87 and 88, I think those were the most stacked years the tour has ever seen. You had, Troy Beebe and Doug George, and, you won a race with that Elliott was in it, and Mike Chase and McGriff and John Krebs. I think John Krebs, was the first guy I ever saw on an 18-wheeler on the West Coast, So those were some stacked fields and some guys. Krebs had Blue Diamond Almonds, I think it was, or something that sponsored him in an 18-wheeler, and you were sitting next to him in a 71 F-250 with a camper shell.
It was like that. It was the outhouse and the penthouse right next to each other. But that was what was normal for us. It wasn't until 88, 89 that I got a box fan. Up till then, it was the F-250 just packed to the gills and in the open trailer. So
you were late on the box van.
Yeah.
So
way late.
In 89
diesel.
Oh, I got a
diesel that it would go faster backwards up the Grapevine than that diesel.
Yeah. I remember when the first time I towed over the Grapevine with a diesel, I was like, oh man, this is nice. Cause I had not an F-350, an E350 van with a 464, and you could watch the gas gauge go. But
yeah,
I used that, and I thought that towed like a dream over the Grapevine until I borrowed somebody's 7.3 liter diesel, and that thing towed incredible. But I remember in 89, you came to Saugus. I think that was the first time I saw you at Saugus.
The Winston West race.
Yeah. Was that your car or somebody else's car?
That was our, after Riverside shut down is when we went to Winston West racing again. And that's one of the races we went to. And it was close. I could afford it. And we qualified 13th and finished 13th. So I'd never been on a track that small. I learned a lot about Bill Schmidt, what a smooth guy he was. First time I spun out during the race, I looked out my right window and I saw him coming by, and I was convinced I spun myself out. The second time I spun out in that race, I looked out the right window and there goes Bill Schmidt again. And I went, you are smooth, buddy. He spun me out and made me think I did it myself.
Was he
So-
lapping you by any chance or no?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was,
So he didn't give you the warning tap. He just did you.
no, I just saw him out my right window when I was spinning.
Yeah, because usually you get the little love tap, and then you get the "Hey, I'm here," and then it's like, "All right, dude, now you're looking out the window." But
The next time I found out how he's the man is when I went to Monroe and ran the 500. And I got out of the car. I was sick. I was just dying. I knew I wasn't going to make it to the next day. And I look up, and here he's walking by with a beer in his hand, like, "Hey, what's happening?" And I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh
he was
my
no
God,
youngster.
I think I'm going to have to go to the hospital." And this old guy is looking like he didn't even do it.
Yeah, him
So-
and Herschel would get out of the car,
God,
and McCoy, they'd get out of the car, and they'd look like they just got off their surfboard or something. And
I had the chance to tell him how my newfound respect for him, though. When we went to race at Mesa Moran, I went over and said, I knew you're good, but after that Monroe deal, let me tell you what, you're the man.
And
So
they don't get that a lot, and especially from you being younger, to go tell them that, man,
no,
that's why we love doing these podcasts. I'm telling you, Duke, is because, God, we hear some great stories that haven't been told about the history of West Coast racing. And, not a lot of people know that about West Coast, and not a lot of people know. They still don't give the West Coast any respect. I mean, Derek Thorne gets zero respect.
God, he's good.
Oh, he's the GOAT. He's better than Insolo. He's better than Hornaday, and they're going to hate me for saying it, but Thorne is the GOAT. And man, if somebody would, even today, I think if they put him in a truck, he'd have it figured out in a couple of weeks. And but
he just needs a shot. I'm surprised it hasn't come his way yet.
Yeah, maybe we need to crowdfund for him. Get him in a truck, because
he's another good thing he's got going is he's really hands-on, and
yes,
I truly believe that does make a difference. Maybe not in the cup level, but with what we're doing, the more you knew about that stuff, and could, if you couldn't get the transmission to last, you had to figure out how to make it last. And so these were the things we learned along the way to just be able to finish.
Right. Yeah. I was not a good mechanic. I could put gears in and out. I couldn't do anything on an engine. And it was just because I always had an engine guy. My engine sponsor was always at the track. And I got to tell you, later on in my career, when he was gone, I think it was, I don't know, like 2011, I was leading the modified points at Irwindale, and they wanted to see our distributor before the race. And I pulled my distributor out, and then I just left my car on the trailer. And my buddy, Keith Spangler, came over. He says, "Why are you leaving your car on the trailer?" I said, I don't even know how to put the distributor back in. I'm going to go home. It is what it is. I already told him, if you want to see it now, I'm going home. And they didn't care. So he goes, I'll put it in time. I didn't know how to time it or anything. Now I could do chassis, but I could not do engine. And I wish I would have paid attention when my engine guy was doing it. You guys did a lot of your own engine work, so you were pretty much raised mechanical.
With the job I had at the dealership, it was bumper to bumper. So the automatic transmission guy was always specialist. I was a front suspension specialist. But if there wasn't enough of that work, I'll take your motor out. I'll fix that thing. But I became a mechanic,
Right?
Yeah, and it just is how I made a living.
Always a Mercedes guy.
Always a Mercedes guy, all the way till I stopped working. So I had no idea that Mercedes would take me as many places I went, and I'm always grateful. I got to work when I worked at the Classic Center. I worked on the 1895 Benz Milord, which was a two-cylinder opposed 8 horsepower, and we fixed up the engine, and we took that thing to London, to Brighton. It wasn't a race; it was a endurance and reliability. So we I got all the way to London doing that. Had dinner with Johann Moss, sat right next to him, talked racing with Johann Moss. So
That's awesome.
It took me places I just never thought.
Do you use mobile oil in that engine?
We did, and that was ended up being the reason it succeeded. I also, now this is big news, I actually sat in and worked on the car that just sold, the Hoenshell Coupe, the most expensive car in the world. So
did it do a Barrett Jackson?
No, it was a private Mercedes-Benz sold it to a private collector, 143 million.
Gee, Merry Christmas.
And it was a race car that was on the street, and you straddled the tunnel. The drive for the rear end was off to the left side of the engine. So you had the gas and the brake on the right and the clutch on the left side of the tunnel. So it was
a sprint car super modified mix.
Yeah, it was amazing engineering for the time. I just had no idea how special it was. Mm-hmm. It was, look at this thing. Are you kidding me? You got to straddle a tunnel?
Right.
It was.
Were you always a Mercedes mechanic?
Yep. 44 years.
So here's some questions that came in off the internet, Duke. Mark Baldwin wants to know, what was so special about the car that you qualified at Riverside and you were like a second and a half faster than everybody else?
Well, that was our little V6 when they were running those things in the Busch Grand National.
Fisher engine.
Our Fisher engine, and my friend John was building them. So he talked Dennis into letting us use one, and there was a 200 pound weight advantage, but they were making 10 more horsepower than the V8s were with the small carburetor. So it was just made complete sense. So
200 pounds lighter.
200 pounds lighter, and we built an entire new car just for that. So they were blaming the six cylinder, but they weren't looking at all the other things we had done to the car that made it fast. So it was we both complemented each other. Mm-hmm. The car was the best that we had at the time. All the thinking and all the lessons learned applied, and then that little 6-cylinder. So
what was the weight rule back then?
It was 33, I think. So we were right at 3,100, but mm-hmm. we were just too fast.
200 pounds is a lot of weight.
That's what got us in trouble. They
that's what always gets you in trouble, right?
They got us. We were too fast. So they came by, and we had it on the pole by a lot. All-time track record, just all good things. And I look up, and here comes Bob Sweeney and Ken Clapp and two other guys. I don't know where they're at. And the enforcers. They come and got my dad and I and took us to a motorhome and said, we're going to have to send you home. And, we didn't really get it, but it had nothing to do with the motor. It had something to do with the way we built the front frame clip. It's unconventional is what they told us. And so we went back and forth, and I said, I've got commitments here. These people are sponsoring me. They're helping me. We got a race. I don't care if I start last. So they made us go home, take the car home after qualifying, and add some frame rails that made it look conventional. And so it was funny because we came in the morning and we were pissed off at all the competitors because we thought we got routed out. But mm-hmm. we covered all the rails and nobody could see nothing. And Bob Sweeney comes over and he picks up the cover and he says, "What am I going to do with you?" I said, "Well, let's just talk about the weight penalty." And so he added that 200 pounds back. And so we didn't have that advantage.
Right.
And he got about 30 feet away, and he turned around and he come up and he got nose to nose with me and said, "Don't stink up the show." Okay, Bob, I won't stink up the show.
That is a lesson I didn't learn until pretty not, I don't want to say deep, but probably around when I was in modifieds at Saugus was the first time that Ray Wilkins and Monty called me in, and they said, no, it was 89, and my Chevelle was really fast. So today's weight rule is 3,500 pounds, which is just stupid, right? The other thing that's stupid that obviously was a problem back then is how many promoters, how many tech guys will just say, go home, right? Well, the racers are only going to go home so many times before they jump in a boat or something with their family, and they say, screw this. Like, it's terrible. But I remember when they allowed us to go to the metric cars, the 108-inch Regals and stuff. Mm-hmm. We were sponsored by Pick Your Part, and we went to the junkyard and we found out that the Regal had an aluminum hood and aluminum deck lid, and the Ford Fairmont bumper only weighed 30 pounds. And so there was no weight rule in that year. So we had a car that weighed 2,300 pounds racing against at Saugus. And so 200 pounds is huge. 1,000 pounds is massive. And so I can see that, that 200 pounds breaking it, accelerating it, the wear and tear on the tires, that was probably a pretty big advantage at Riverside.
Definitely. It was, you used your calculator and you went horsepower divided by weight, and it gave you pounds per horsepower per pound.
Yeah.
And it was like significant. So it made the decision easy. And having John work there and promote me and us, that made it happen too.
Fisher made good stuff.
He did. And he was killing it in the Busch Grand National at that time.
I know the Hornaday said that he had a Fisher engine in one of his trucks when he went racing for Senior, because Dale Senior had ran some. So Joe Nava wants to know, where's his black cast iron skillet? His
brother has them. I sent him 3. You better look in the trunk of your brother's car.
I'm going to tell him. I never knew that Nava had been he still looks young. He doesn't look a day over 50, but
he was something to us. He's told me he really wanted to beat us, and we really wanted to beat him. Also, I mean, he had the good stuff. He had the good people. And one thing he had that we didn't have is he had somebody make him, when they wire tie your carburetor to the intake manifold and they had that little pincher. They pinched that lead thing that said NASCAR. Joe had one of those.
Nava cheated?
Well,
he probably cheats today.
Let me tell you, I tried to get Larry, his brother, to cough it up. He wouldn't cough it up, man. He held tight.
Did you ever drive one of his cars?
No, I never drove anybody else's car other than ours.
Yeah. And you never cheated? Come on, Duke. Give us like one little.
I don't know what he called cheating.
Like give us a rule that was written because of you, or some gray area or something that.
Well, they changed the whole V6 motor thing. They were out within a month, and you couldn't have the front frame rails go flat out to the front. Like, you had to have a stock conventional style front frame clip. So they changed. I didn't think that was cheating. It was easier to build.
Right. And I get what you're saying. Some gray area. I mean, when we started, you could have an 1.5 065 cage, and that was 300 pounds lighter than a heavy cage. And,
I think truthfully, some of these teams have a guy on the payroll to figure out how to cheat.
Yeah.
And we were so busy just getting to the track that, you had to get past those officials, man. You never wanted to let Art Krebs down or Jim Blungren or any of those guys. You had so much respect for them. So you weren't gonna do anything like that.
Yeah, I agree. And the officials, it's a tough on them too, because, they just want to be officials and we just want to race. And, you're lined up outside before the race and they're inside the gate and they're just waiting. I always thought it would be so much better if they came around on a golf cart and teched you in your own pit while you were getting last minute stuff done, rather than line you all up and make you push through I never had enough guys to help me push. I was always pushing myself, but I think Brandon has a question too. What do you got, B?
Yeah, I just got a few questions. I asked some similar questions to everybody that we do these podcasts with. But before I get into those ones, I could see why. I could see why people love you, Duke. I could see why people want to hang with you. I want to drive down to Orange, and I'm not a drinking guy, but I'd love to buy you a drink and just hang out. You just got that fun personality. But I'm always curious, just because I'm a big movie guy. But what, in your mind, is the most realistic car chase, race, or scene in a movie or show that you've seen?
I think the Bullet with Steve McQueen, that was the most real to me. Days of Thunder was a little bit of yuck to us, but you could drive that car like he did, man. That was just awesome.
Love it. And then a couple of more serious questions, but what do you miss most about racing?
I believe I think I was a way better mechanic than I was a driver. And I miss that innovative part and that thinking part, and that I really do miss that. I got to experience that a little bit with some Mercedes at big projects that you just put your heart and soul in, and that was neat. But I really miss that finessing and tinkering, and we were inventing things at that time. Nobody was making it, so you had to do your homework upstairs and put a lot of thought into it and make it happen, and then go prove it. So I miss that part a lot.
What was one of the biggest lessons, if not the biggest lesson or takeaway, that you got personally from racing?
Well, the first time we won, up until that point, people were just all over helping me, and they were really looked out for me. And then when we won, we go back the next time, and it was like I was a stranger to some of them. So I say winning isn't always winning. I miss that part with these people. And so the only one that kept helping me was Ron Esau. Regardless if we beat him or he beat us, he always looked out for me.
If you had to go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
I don't think I could have worked any harder. So it would be just try and be more like my dad.
Last question. If you had to do it all over again, would you change anything?
No, not a second. Not a second. I still use things to make a living and do, tinker in the garage that I learned then. So I wouldn't change a thing, man. Not a bit. I would have liked for my kids to got more exposed to it, but I was tapering off on the racing, and the kids were coming. So I would have really liked to have them see me race. And now they just have to live by my stories.
Like these.
Yep.
Yes. And the only one, everybody else gives me the Stevie Wonder while I'm telling the stories, but my son listens.
The internet ruined my career. I'm going to tell you that right now with my kids, because I couldn't lie anymore. Before the internet, you could be like, shit, I won Riverside 25 times. Now they could just Google it. What are you going to do with the 57, Duke?
I'm just going to keep it. When I got it, one of the things I thought would be neat is to be able to I went out to Irwindale once and hung with David Gillen and them. And Ron Hornaday had his dad's car out there. So, and he did the parade lap and stuff with that. And I thought, well, this would be a good car to just take out there and do that one day. Park it out there, have the little kids come around and check it out and go, this is what's happened here. It started with this stuff and look what it's turned into.
I'm sure there's plenty of guys out there you could help too, Duke. You know.
Well, yeah, I played. I was Butch Gilliland's crew chief for 3 years, and that was a wonderful experience for me. And that, I think, truly, I was at my best then, mechanics wise, and I had a wonderful time with those people.
You still keep in touch with Butch?
Yes, and I keep in touch with David. David is still somebody very special to our family. So, and seeing where he's gone and how Todd's doing, and
Todd's a good kid.
It's just wonderful. I'm so proud of David. And
it's interesting too that I'm just playing this in my head that, you know, when I talked to Todd at Darlington, he doesn't know who I am, but he stopped and talked to me. He doesn't know that I knew his grandpa. He doesn't know that I knew his dad. I had to tell him. But Harrison Burton is another kid that just talks to everybody and takes pictures of everybody. And I'm thinking in my head that the kids that are third generation kids, they get it. It's the credit card kids that don't get it. They don't understand it. Unfortunately,
they never will. Unfortunately, but I could tell right off the bat, David was a good kid. And so him and I think he was 16 when I was helping Butch, and 17 going through those few years. And we were like stuck together. I really liked that kid. We were standing right next to in Jeff Gordon's pits when he won the inaugural Indy race.
Brickyard,
we just had some great times together. One of the best family vacations we've ever been on with them. And so I miss that too. I miss those people.
Yeah.
I do like being around people like that, like-minded, and they can laugh. And let me tell you what, Butch's wife, Lori, she makes a mean cocktail.
And then the stories come. You think you could lob a call to Butch and get him on our show?
Hey, I'll try it. He's in Thailand. Yeah. So Thailand.
Is that where he lives?
Yes, he does.
That's a story in and of itself right there. I probably don't even want to hear it.
I'm not going to tell you. Butch has to tell you.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on the show, and I know David's busy,
people.
But
we were both dealership guys, both front end and suspension guys. We had a parallel life, just 25 miles apart from each other. When I quit the dealer and decided to open my own shop, I did it because I knew I could do it, because they showed me the example. Mm-hmm. They had built their own shop, and I used their inspiration and the example they set for me. So they were a huge part of that 5 or 6 years of my life. I wouldn't change that for nothing.
So Brandon, we've asked everybody what makes a good race car driver. We need to add humility to that list, because Duke is certainly a humble guy. We appreciate you being on, Duke. I have one last question for you. Why 38?
Well, my dad was 37 and Chuck Wall was racing, so we couldn't go 36. So Jimmy was racing in Winston West, I think, at the time. So it was 38. Simple as that. And then it ended up being a challenge, because we went to a lot of the races together.
Right.
And at that time, if 238 showed up, the guy that qualified fastest had to change their number. So we changed our number an awful lot of times, but eventually we didn't have to change our number anymore.
88 was easy, right?
It was cake. we even had the silly paints ready.
Yep.
Man.
You know what I did is I just registered 38 at all the tracks. I knew I was going to eventually. I was like, I get what this is going. I just registered 38 in every division at Saugus. I thought I was going to race, and at El Cajon, everywhere 38. You know,
Yeah.
so well, we appreciate you, Duke. Appreciate your wife helping us out. We know it's been a tough year, losing your pops, and you're really, really good friend. Why don't you take us out with a good Ron Esau story?
Well, the best one I had was when we were on the Ronnie and Duke Slammer race. I was struggling in turn 9, and the car was doing this, and I'd get on the gas, and it was this. And so I went over and hit him up, and he says, well, are your lower links uphill in the rear? I said, yeah, 1 inch. Oh, you got to drop them down 1. You got to have them level. And so when I passed him on the outside going through turn 9, that's pretty much ended all them hot tips I used to get because it made the difference for me. And so it was just part of him being a good man to me.
Yeah.
His family inspired us from the very beginning. When we went to 605, it's the Esau's. They're a racing family. And
yes, they are.
We're going to be a racing family. So we want to be like them. So
I think your pops would be proud of you. I think Ron would be proud of you. I think you set out to be a racing family, and you were a racing family, and you did it without a ton of money, without the golden spoon. And I'm really glad that these people on Facebook had us look you up, Duke. It's been an honor and a privilege, and maybe we'll keep in touch. We're thinking about having one of these with a bunch of drivers on and letting them all play off each other. But
that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Our accomplishments pale in comparison to the other folks you've had on here. But I really appreciate you doing this.
Appreciate you too. You got anything else, Brandon?
Oh, I'm good. This has been a blast. Thank you so much, Duke.
Thanks, Duke. We appreciate
you guys.
All right. Take care.
Take care.